Good Friday afternoon to you. Thanks for joining us on KARE 11 News Now. I'm Chris Harapsky. Let's get right to your headlines. Right now, travel chaos around the world after a massive fire near Heathrow International in London shut down the airport. Heathrow says it'll start accepting what are called reparation flights at some point this afternoon. Those are planes carrying passengers that were diverted to other airports after that fire this morning. The closure overnight forced a plane from Minneapolis bound for London to turn around mid-flight. One of the passengers on that plane, a U.S. Norwegian citizen, said he was only going to Heathrow for a connecting flight.
I was traveling to Oslo, connecting through Heathrow to visit my dad who has cancer, to spend time with him, and now I will have to rebook my flights and find other accommodations for visiting my family.
Heathrow is expected to open and start accepting flights again sometime this afternoon. There's a flight scheduled from MSP to London this afternoon. However, it's not clear if it will take off on time. Turning now to yet another alarming incident involving a passenger plane. Officials say a Southwest flight in Florida was set to take off when air traffic controllers realized that the plane was not even on the runway. It comes as investigators released preliminary findings about what may have caused the Delta flight to flip upside down last month while landing in Toronto. NBC's Maggie Vespa is here with details.
Questions mounting about another aviation incident, this time a close call at Florida's Orlando International Airport.
Stop 3278, stop with 3278, stop. Cancel takeoff clearance. You're on hotel taxiway.
A Southwest Airlines flight heading to Albany, New York Thursday, abruptly halting its takeoff after the airline confirms the pilots nearly took off from the taxiway instead of the runway.
He was on the taxi lane and decided to take off and was not where you take off, and then jammed on the brakes, and we just went flying.
The FAA now saying an air traffic controller canceled the takeoff clearance after the aircraft began its takeoff roll on a taxiway. Taxiways, typically shorter than runways, are not intended for takeoffs or landings. Southwest says no injuries were reported, and they arranged for another plane to take passengers to their destination. The FAA now investigating how it could have happened. This marks the latest in a string of alarming aviation incidents, including this jaw-dropping crash in Toronto last month. This morning, Canadian authorities shedding light into what may have caused that Delta flight to flip over while landing. Incredibly, everyone on board survived.
Our plane crashed. It's upside down.
The Transportation Safety Board of Canada saying in preliminary findings the plane was descending too quickly, setting off an alarm seconds before landing. As it hit the ground, they say the plane's right landing gear fractured and the right wing broke off, releasing a cloud of jet fuel, which caught fire. The report including these never-before-seen photos showing that wing 200 feet away from the wreckage.
Maggie Vespa reporting there. Elon Musk is sitting in on a Pentagon briefing. The billionaire advisor to President Trump arrived at the Department of Defense headquarters Friday morning. Musk taking part in meetings with senior U.S. military leaders as he leads the effort to make sweeping cuts to the government. Musk arrived in a motorcade and quickly moved upstairs to meet U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth before continuing on for further meetings. According to two U.S. officials familiar with the meetings, Musk is expected to be briefed on China. Though late last night, President Trump, Musk, and Hegseth all denied that. Today outside the Department of Education, a study-in protesting President Trump's recent executive order paving the way to end the department. Just last week, the DOE staff was nearly cut in half with about 1,300 employees laid off. The Trump administration says the move is fulfilling a campaign promise and helping greatly reduce the size of the federal government. There's a lot of confusion about what President Trump's executive action will and won't do, so let's verify. It'll make the Department of Education smaller, something the president has said he wants to do. It will also direct Secretary Linda McMahon to, quote, take all necessary steps to facilitate the closure of the Department of Education, end quote. Here's what the action won't do. According to President Trump, it won't get rid of federal Pell Grants. It won't get rid of funding for Title I or children with disabilities. This also won't impact curriculum, as the Department of Education doesn't have any say in those requirements. What we don't know yet, how this will impact student loans, because the Department of Education oversees the $1.6 trillion federal student loan portfolio. Very somber anniversary today in Minnesota. It has been 20 years since the Red Lake Reservation shooting. 16-year-old Jeffrey Weiss shot and killed his grandfather, his grandfather's girlfriend, before showing up at Red Lake High School the afternoon of March 21st, 2005. He ended up killing 8 people, most of them at the Red Lake Reservation School, before killing himself. About 6,000 tribe members live on the reservation, and almost every resident lost a friend or a family member that day. Kent Erdahl visited Red Lake 20 years later. Make sure you tune in to KARE 11 at 4, 5, and 6 for that impactful story. Okay, this video out of West Virginia is intense. A driver getting dangerously close to a student walking across the street after leaving their school bus. There's several different angles that you can see here. The car's mirror just inches from hitting that child. The driver ended up getting arrested a few days later for DUI and getting his car impounded. Thankfully, the child was okay. The future of the X in downtown St. Paul is making its way to the state capitol. City leaders and wild officials just shared their massive $796 million proposal. They're asking state lawmakers to cover about half of that cost. Gordon Severson joins us now with more on these plans and what comes next.
When you think of a building that needs renovations, you may not think of a thriving sports arena where big-name bands and hockey tournaments are being played.
Big things are happening.
Given that success, it's a tough ask for Mayor Melvin Carter and the Minnesota Wild to have the state cover half of a nearly $770 million renovation, including the Xcel Energy Center.
I recognize the face value paradox of making an argument for an arena renovation among communities arguing for critical needs.
The proposal did receive some pushback from lawmakers who are concerned about the high price tag.
Unfortunately, this is a huge ask.
How we get to that dollar amount is going to be the challenge.
While $394 million in state funding is a lot of money, Carter argues the X, River Center, and Roy Wilkins Auditorium bring that much money into the local economy every year.
Like many of you, I know how the energy in this city shifts when there's a concert or a game going on at the X.
Wild owner Craig Leopold says the team is willing to chip in $215 million. He agrees with Carter that renovations are needed to keep the arena competitive for big events.
It's a crowded marketplace right now.
Chris Dunleavy says there is truth to that statement. He's the CEO of Brailsford and Dunleavy, a company that develops sports facilities across the country.
Nationwide, there is a boom of buildings that have reached the end of their first useful life.
And he says other cities are making those upgrades, so there is pressure to keep up. However, with many other cities and states also facing tight budgets, he expects there will be some wiggle room with the numbers.
They may ask that the private sector, that the teams or the leagues come to the table with a higher percentage of the funding.
Gordon Severson reporting there. Hey, Mariah Carey isn't the Grinch who stole a Christmas song. A copyright lawsuit over her classic, All I Want for Christmas Is You, was dismissed in a Los Angeles court. Songwriters Andy Stone and Troy Powers had sought $20 million in damages, claiming Carey stole their track of the same name. However, an analysis of both songs by a musicologist determined the similarities were, quote, fragmentary. According to the court documents, it was determined there was a lack of evidence to prove the allegations of theft. Carey's song has sold more than 10 million copies and has been streamed more than 2 billion times as of last December. Stick with us, more news and weather coming up after the break.